Hello dancers! Today's story is The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time there were 4 little rabbits, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the woods to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes, and feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting young cabbages. But he jumped up. "Stop, thief!" he called out. Peter was dreadfully frightened and rushed all over the garden. He had forgotten where the gate was. He lost one of his shoes in the cabbages and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. Then he ran on all 4 legs as fast as he could, and he might have gotten away if he hadn't got the buttons of his jacket caught on a large gooseberry net. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to help him. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind, and rushed into the tool shed. He jumped right into a can. It would have been a great place to hide if there hadn't been so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, and he began looking. Presently Peter sneezed. Kerchoo! Mr. McGregor was after him again in no time. Finally, Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. After a time, he began to wander about. He found a door in the wall, but it was locked. An old mouse was running in and out of a stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to her family. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth she could not answer. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but became more puzzled. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very still, but now and then the tip of her tail would twitch. Peter thought it was best to go away without speaking to her. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly quite close he heard the scritch-scratch of a hoe. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon a wheelbarrow. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor. His back was turned towards Peter, but beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looking behind him until he got home. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand of the floor of his rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I'm sorry to say that Peter was not feeling very well that evening. His mother put him to bed and made him some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. I hope you enjoyed today's story. I hope you have a great rest of class.